भगवता नारायणेन स्वयं व्यासेन ग्रथितां पुराणमुनिना मध्ये महाभारतम् अद्वैतामृतवर्षिणीं भगवतीम् अष्टादशाध्यायिनीम् अम्ब त्वामनुसन्दधामि भगवद्गीते भवद्वेषिणीम् नमोऽस्तु ते व्यासविशालबुद्धे पुल्लारविन्दायतपत्रनेत्र येन त्वया भारततैलपूर्णः प्रज्वालितो ज्ञानमयप्रदीपः प्रपन्नपारिजाताय स्तोत्रवेत्रैकपाणये ज्ञानमुद्राय कृष्णाय गीतामृतदुहे नमः। सर्वोपनिषदो गावो दोग्धा गोपालनन्दनः पार्थो वत्सः सुधीर्भोक्ता दुग्धं गीतामृतं महत् वसुदेवसुतं देवं कंसचाणूरमर्दनं देवकी परमानन्दं कृष्णं वन्दे जगद्गुरुम् भीष्मद्रोणतटा जयद्रथजला गान्धारनीलोपला शल्यग्राहवती कृपेण वहनी कर्णेन वेलाकुला अश्वत्थामविकर्णघोरमकरा दुर्योधनावर्तिनी सोत्तीर्णा खलु पाण्डवैरणनदी कैवर्तकः केशवः पाराशर्यवचः सरोजममलम् गीतार्थगन्धोत्कटम् नानाख्यानककेसरं हरिकथा सम्बोधनाबोधितम् लोके सज्जनषट्पदैरहरहः पेपीयमानं मुदा भूयाद्भारतपङ्कजं कलिमलः प्रध्वंसि न श्रेयसे मूकं करोति वाचालं पङ्गुं लङ्घयते गिरिं यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे परमानन्दमाधवम् यं ब्रह्मा वरुणेन्द्ररुद्रमरुतः स्तुन्वन्ति दिव्यैस्तवैः वेदैः साङ्गपदक्रमोपनिषदैः गायन्ति यं सामगाः ध्यानावस्थिततद्गतेन मनसा पश्यन्ति यं योगिनो यस्यान्तन्न विदुः सुरासुरगणाः देवाय तस्मै नमः।
Om Gurubhyo Namaha. We continue with Chapter 5, Karma Sannyasa Yoga, the Yoga of Action and Renunciation of Action. Here is the essence of the verses number 17 and 18, translation and commentary by Maharishi. Let us begin. Tatbuddhayas-tadatmana stannishta statparayanaha gacchantya punaravrittim jnana-nirdhuta kalmashaha. Next. Vidya vinaya sampanne brahmane gavihastini sunichaiva swapakecha Pandita Samadarshinaha. Here is the English translation of verse number 17. Their intellect rooted in that, their being established in that, intent on that, wholly devoted to that, cleansed of all impurities by wisdom, they attain to a state from which there is no return. I will repeat. Their intellect rooted in that, their being established in that, intent on that, wholly devoted to that, cleansed of all impurities by wisdom, they attain to a state from which there is no return. Next, in a Brahmana endowed with learning and humility, in a cow, in an elephant, in a dog, and even in one who has lost his caste, the enlightened perceive the same. In the last verse, we saw very clearly how ignorance is destroyed by gaining knowledge. The omnipresent being is veiled only by ignorance, and when this veil has been destroyed by knowledge, it shines forth in its own light. So again, Bhagavan emphasized that knowledge is not gained by destroying ignorance. Again, knowledge is not gained by destroying ignorance, but ignorance is destroyed by gaining knowledge. So, it is important for a seeker to gain the knowledge through direct experience and not to spend time and effort in trying to come out of ignorance. Now, let us go over the verse number 17 again. Their intellect rooted in that, their being established in that, intent on that, wholly devoted to that, cleansed of all impurities by wisdom, they attain to a state from which there is no return. Here in this verse, thus yoga and Sankhya are united in their common goal. And what is their common goal? It is the absolute purity and eternal liberation. So again, whether one is taking the path of yoga or the path of Sankhya, the common goal remains the same, that is attaining purity and attaining eternal liberation. So here earlier in the verses number 4 and 5, we have seen that the wise who have had the direct experience of the self understand that Sankhya and Yoga are not different. Because whether one is following the path of Sankhya as for the recluse or the path of Yoga for the householder, one has to be properly established in the knowledge. And what is this knowledge? This is the knowledge of the self or the self-realization. So here for both of them, the understanding and experience of the self is of vital importance. And so both on the path have to transcend and experience the transcendent and come to the realization that they are the self alone. So here again, the path of Sankhya and the Yoga, although designed to satisfy different kinds of people, their goal, their common goal or ultimate goal is the same. In the Sankhya, the two different components, the changing and the unchanging, the ephemeral and the lasting, are continuously contemplated. So here, the transcendental meditation alternates with activity on the level of the senses. In the Karma Yoga, whereas in the Sankhya, it alternates with the mental activity. So again, one performs the activity on the level of the senses and the other performs the activity on the mental level. But both need the basis of transcendence through transcendental meditation. So except for this small difference, Sankhya and Yoga are the same. Further, these two paths start from and proceed on the common ground of transcendence through TM, and as they advance, both give rise to the same experience of renunciation in cosmic consciousness. Here, when it is said in the verse, their intellect rooted in that, their being established in that, intent on that, and wholly devoted to that. Let's try to understand this further. Here, the words intellect and being are of great significance, and also they are used in a sequence which is also significant. Here, the word being is used to translate the Sanskrit word Atma, and in this particular verse, the word Atma or the being is used to mean the self, the intellect, the mind, the breath, and the body variously. And here the word that is spoken to signify the eternal freedom of the transcendent. Again, this word that is the transcendent, it is the knowledge itself, and also it signifies the eternal freedom. So now, having understood this terminology, how it is used in the verse, let us proceed. When the intellect is rooted in that, the whole of one's being also becomes established in that. Moreover, when during meditation the intellect becomes rooted in that, on coming out of the transcendent, it remains intent on that. When the intellect becomes intent on that, one's being becomes wholly devoted to that. So again, when the intellect is rooted in the self, the whole of one's being also becomes established in the self. And on coming out of the transcendent, it remains intent on the self. And when the intellect becomes intent on self, one becomes wholly devoted to the self. So further, when one says wholly devoted to that, means that the mind, the breath, and the body all become oriented towards that. Now let us look at the next phrase. Cleansed of all impurities by wisdom, they attain to a state from which there is no return. So here, this verse makes it clear that purity of life is the basis of all success in the world. And it is also the basis of eternal freedom gained by wisdom. And what is this wisdom? It is the realization of the transcendent or the self-realization. Again, unless the intellect and the whole of one's being are established in the transcendent reality, they are not pure. Here again, the word being is used to refer to the intellect, the mind, the breath, and the body. So, this Atma or the being will not be pure unless established in the transcendent reality. because it remains in the realm of temporary existence and is unconnected with the state of eternal freedom, from where there is no return. So here again, unless the transcendent absolute phase of life is realized, which is the self-realization and also growing into the cosmic consciousness, the scope of the individual phase of life remains insignificant and its purpose is not fulfilled. One remains in the realm of temporary existence, the bondage continues, and the cycle of birth and death meets no end. So, we understand that the purity of life is gained by the self-realization, and this purity further is stabilized in the absolute, gaining a permanent status as in cosmic consciousness. So again here, Bhagavan cautions that if this absolute state of purity is not stabilized by rising to the state of cosmic consciousness, then there is always the possibility of his stepping down to a lower level of life. Try to understand this. As long as the transcendental consciousness has not become permanent, the effect of morning meditation does not persist in its full intensity throughout the day. And as the day goes by, the intensity of the effect diminishes, and with this even the level of purity falls. And when one does the evening meditation, this purity again is restored. And this is why we always say one should be regular with meditation. And further maintaining this purity is being without the three gunas, or acting or doing your activities without the three gunas. That means you remain as being. Further, Bhagavan, by using the word that, makes it clear that the goal of life does not lie in the sphere of phenomenal existence. It lies beyond it. So again, the real life is not this, but it is that which is beyond the phenomenal existence. And this is the teaching of life from the standpoint of renunciation. Upanishads have declared, Tattvam asi, thou art that, or that thou art, implying that this obvious phase of phenomenal existence which you take as yourself is not your real nature. You in fact are the transcendent reality. When Bhagavan says, from which there is no return, here it means as long as the self is not embedded in the eternity of life, as long as the mind has not permanently gained the absolute purity, as in transcendental consciousness, then the life remains within the relative field of existence. So in this situation, the cycle of birth and death continues within the various strata of the evolution of life. On the contrary, when one has gained cosmic consciousness, life goes beyond the sphere of birth and death. Because as being, one is eternal and it is changeless. It cannot partake of change. It has moved out of the sphere of the ever-changing phenomenal existence. Further, it is very important to note that this situation can only be created during man's life on earth. And this is why we say it is Jivan Mukti, That means one attains this when one is still in the body. So again, it is as a man that one rises to that state from which there is no return. And the way to this lies in the principle described in the 45th verse of chapter 2. I am reading this verse number 45 from chapter 2. The Veda's concern is with the three gunas. Be without the three gunas, O Arjuna, freed from duality, ever firm in purity, independent of possessions, possessed of the self. Finally, let me read the verse number 17 again so that you have a very clear understanding now. Their intellect rooted in that, their being established in that, intent on that, wholly devoted to that, cleansed of all impurities by wisdom, they attain to a state from which there is no return. Now let us continue with the next verse. Here is verse number 18. In a Brahmana, endowed with learning and humility, in a cow, in an elephant, in a dog, and even in one who has lost his caste, the enlightened perceive the same. So here there are three important phrases. In a Brahmana, endowed with learning and humility. Second, in a cow, in an elephant, in a dog, and even in one who has lost his caste. And number 3 is the enlightened perceive the same. Let us look into these in detail. This verse provides a criteria of vision in the state of enlightenment. Those who have realized the reality of life perceive this same oneness through all the diversity of experience. Here, a Brahmana endowed with learning and humility represents all that is dominated by the influence of sattva. A cow represents all that is dominated by the mixed influence of rajas and sattva. A dog represents all that is dominated by rajas and tamas. And an elephant represents all that is dominated by the influence of tamas. The phrase, one who has lost his caste, represents the lowest in the human life, a man living in complete ignorance and who has lost the path of his evolution. The further meaning of this is that one who has realized the self as separate from the field of relative existence is steadfast in himself and quite untouched by the influence of sattva, rajas and tamas and the tendencies that arise from them. And this is why he has evenness of vision everywhere. Now let's understand this further. The mind of the realized man is fully infused with the state of being. And as we know, when one is the being, all that there is the oneness. And this oneness is the oneness of life. So, the mind of such a realized man naturally has oneness of vision, irrespective of what he sees. The apparent distinctions of relative existence fail to create division in his view. Now, this is important to understand. This doesn't mean that such a man fails to see a cow or is unable to distinguish it from a dog. Here, he certainly sees a cow as a cow, a dog as a dog, but the form of the cow and the form of the dog fail to blind him to the oneness of the self, which is the same in both. So he sees this oneness of the self, the oneness of this pure consciousness, as the same in both. So again, although he sees a cow and a dog, his self is established in the being of the cow and the being of the dog, which is again his own being. So here, Bhagavan is stressing this point that the enlightened man, while beholding and acting in the whole of diversified creation, he does not fall from his steadfast unity of life. This steadfast unity of life is saturated in his mind, and it remains indelibly infused into his vision. Let us try to understand this further. A Brahmana is a man born in a family whose life is dedicated to the study of the Veda and spiritual learning. Bhagavan, by the use of this word Brahmana, in conjunction with the cow, elephant and dog, indicates that the Lord wants to emphasize that the being of an evolved man and that of the animals is the same. And here, the enlightened person, established in the oneness of being, and having realized the unity of the transcendent underlying all diversity, he gains evenness of vision. And again, when Bhagavan says, in a Brahmana endowed with learning and humility, here the word humility is commonly understood to be the honest recognition of one's personal limitations, one's ignorance and insignificance. Here, the true humility lies in the quality of being and not in any attitude of the mind. When one gains wisdom, one gains also humility. So here, the wise man or the enlightened one sees the distinction and differences in creation as only temporary, and with only one ultimate reality underlying them all. So again, he sees the one ultimate reality underlying all the diversity, the different distinctions and differences in creation as only temporary. So he develops this humility and does not insist that things should happen in any particular way. He takes things lightly, for he knows that they have their common end. So here, this natural quality of being in the wise is interpreted as humility. So again, this humility is the criteria of wisdom, of gaining the wisdom. And what is it gaining? It is gaining the increased sense of oneness of life and the wisdom that there is the basic unity of all beings. So here again we see that this humility is also a natural progression of the mind with the natural progression in the knowledge. And it is not just an attitude in the mind. Now let me read the verse again so that you understand it better. In a Brahmana endowed with learning and humility, in a cow, in an elephant, in a dog, and even in one who has lost his caste, the enlightened perceive the same. So here Bhagavan started presenting this mind established in equanimity, and we will continue on this theme tomorrow. So let me end here. Jai Gurudev, Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu.
शास्त्रम्